Hello there and welcome. In the previous episode, we added water into our game, we also added swimming and diving, and the next logical thing to add is fishing, because this is something that you can find in a lot of survival games, and this is something that is also related to the water, so this is the right time to do it. So the first thing we're going to do is set up our fishing rod model. We're going to equip it, we're going to be able to use it, and we're going to add some basic animations. Now, you can use any kind of model that you want to follow this tutorial, but if you want to use the one that I'm using, then you can go to the link in the description. This is a paid asset that I've created, and I can't just give it to you for free because I did spend time on it, and after all, I do want to have some kind of income because I do all of this for free anyway. Now, you're not going to have a problem following this tutorial because I'm going to provide you the same exact script so you can put it on your own model. The only difference is that this model will have an extra functionality of the string attached to the bait. So each time you cast the rod into the water, the string is going to be attached to the bait. So it will look a bit better, but that's the only difference. And of course, I'm going to explain to you how to set up everything. So you really don't have to use this rod. You can use any free or paid asset that you want. So if you decided to download this model, then you're going to import it and find the folder over here. We're going to open the prefabs and we're going to find the fishing rod prefab. Now it's going to be exactly the same if you have your own different model. First of all, we need to drag it into the scene and position it inside the hands of the player so we know the exact positions to instantiate this model later. So you take your model, you drag it into the scene, you're going to expand the player, and we're going to find this tool holder. So this is the transform that we're using to instantiate the axe and other things. So we're going to drag the fishing rod into this tool holder, and then we're going to reset the position, and we're going to find the exact position that looks good for the fishing rod. So I already know the values. For this model, it's about 0.5, 0.5, 0.8, and I'm going to rotate this on the y-axis a bit, so it's going to face this way. Now for a different model, the values may be a bit different, but just make sure that it looks good. So when you instantiate this model, it will appear in this position. And because it's a child of the tool holder, then it's always going to be in this position. Now, as you can see, I have an animator on this model and I have a fishing rod script. And this is something that will come with this model if you download it. If not, you're going to simply create some animations, and I'm going to show you what animations we need. And I'm also going to provide you this fishing rod script in the description of this video. So you simply need to download and create this script. All you do is add a new component and add a fishing rod script. So fishing rod, and you give it the complete name, you press enter, and you paste the code that I provided to you in this script. So you need to have this exact thing. Now, if you're not using this model, you're not going to have all of these things, but you're still going to see them over here. So we're going to deal with them inside of the script because you're not going to have all of these references. And as I told you, these are just things that are going to affect the visual way this rod is looking. You're going to have a rope that connects to the bait. So when you throw it into the water, you're going to see the string just attached to the bait. Now, of course, this is just for the visuals. If you want to spawn some kind of bait on the water, you can add a prefab over here. So I'm using this bait prefab, but of course this is just optional. The next thing you need to do, especially if you don't have any kind of animation of your model, and maybe you have another model that has animations, so it's good. You're going to have to create some animations. Of course, it's optional. It depends on the complexity of your game. Now, if you are creating your own model, just some kind of prototype, then make sure that the actual model is inside a parent, because we're going to place the animator on the parent, and then the model will be relative to the parent. So we can rotate it and we can move it, and it will be relative to the parent. So don't just create the model with an animator. Make sure the model is inside of a parent that has this animator. So to create animations, we already know how to do this. Of course, we can spend hours on creating perfect animations, but we already know how to do it. We created our axe, we had our hands. So you simply click on this main fishing rod, you go to the animations, and then you create a new animation. You will have a button over here to create a new animation, and then you need to animate it. For example, over here, I have 4 animations. I have the cast rod, the casted rod, the pull rod, and the pulling rod. So these are 4 different states. First of all, we have the cast rod. You're simply going to move the rod backwards, forwards, and then you're going to pull it up a bit. So this is a basic casting animation. So you can see I only have 4 different keyframes. It goes back a bit, then it goes forward for the casting, and then it goes back a bit over here. Then we have the casted rod, and this is just some kind of way to keep our rod in a casting position, so it shakes a bit, right, when it waits for the fish to bite. Then we have the pull rod, and this is when we want to pull the rod. So again, it's just going to start at the casting position and it's going to get pulled, and then it's going to stay in this position. And we also have the pulling rod. So this is just a way to keep our rod pulling and moving a bit. So this is not something complicated. And of course, if you're going to have your own models, they may come with animations, but these are simple animations that you can create. And again, this has nothing to do with the fishing system. This is purely visual. So when you create these animations, you're going to get the animator component. So if we go into the component over here, we can see that all of these animations are created. And the way you want to set them up is to have your empty state and then just have a transition to the cast rod. And you will have 2 triggers, cast and pull. So if the cast trigger is triggered, you're going to cast the rod. Then you're going to move to the casted rod, but you're not going to have any kind of condition. So it will automatically move from the cast rod into the casted rod. And you're going to have has exit time. Over here, you don't need an exit time because you have a condition. Then from the casted rod, you're going to have a condition. If the pull trigger is triggered, you're going to move to the pull animation, and you're going to have a transition to the pulling rod without any condition. So it will automatically go from this to this. Now you also need to make sure that both of these animations are not looping, because these are just one-time animations, but both of these should be looping. So you can simply click on this animation, click over here, and it will take you to the actual animation. You click on it and you make sure that loop time is enabled. Also for the pulling rod, make sure the loop time is enabled, but for the pull and for the cast, make sure it's not selected. Now, of course, if you're using this model, it's going to be set up. You don't need to do anything. I'm just explaining to you if you're creating them on your own. Now, when you're done with the animations and with the script, you're going to create a prefab out of your fishing rod. So you're going to open your resources folder and you're going to drag your fishing rod into this folder. Now, in order to not affect the original prefab that you had, you're simply going to unpack it and then you're going to create a new fishing rod. And we're also going to rename it to fishing rod model because this is the convention that we're using. We have it with the axe model and the hand model, so name it fishing rod model. Now, we also need to make sure that everything is working at the moment before we continue with actually equipping this rod. So at the moment, keep this fishing rod over here because we want to test it out and see that everything is working. So the way we're going to do it is basically point at a water source, and then when we're pointing at the water source, we're going to have fishing is available. And when fishing is going to be available, then we're going to be able to click and cast the rod into the water and start with the fishing. Now, because we already have this water source, we're going to select this deep lake and we're going to add a tag on the lake to identify this lake as a fishing area. So first of all, we're going to create a new tag and we're going to name it fishing area. And we're going to add it on the deep lake. Now it depends how everything is set up and where are your colliders. You may also want to add the fishing area on this one, and because we have the underwater effect over here, you may also want to add the tag on the underwater effect. So just make sure if it's not working for you that everything is set up and maybe you have another collider that is in the way. And the reason we're using fishing area tag is because inside of the script, this is the tag that we're looking for, okay? So of course you can change the name. You can also change the script to use a layer, so maybe a water layer, but this is up to you. Now, at the moment, on our deep lake, we have a box collider, which is trigger. And the underwater effect is also trigger, obviously, because we want to be able to enter into the water and swim, so we cannot just make it a solid collider. We have to make it a trigger. But sometimes your raycast is not going to detect a trigger box collider. So just make sure that you go into project settings, physics, and that the queries hit triggers is enabled, because if it's not going to be enabled, then the raycast is not going to detect colliders that are trigger. Okay, so just make sure that it's enabled. So now when we run the game, we can see that if we're pointing at something else, then the fishing is not available, but as soon as we're pointing at the water source, then the fishing boolean is enabled, is true, and this will allow us to fish. Also, the is equipped is enabled because in the start of the script, in the start method, I'm enabling the is equipped, and this will get equipped and this will get enabled as soon as we instantiate the item by using our inventory item, but we still did not create it, so it will automatically make it is equipped. Then when we're pointing and both is equipped and is fishing available are true, then we can simply left click and it will do this casting animation and it will cast the bait into the water. Now we can also see that the is casted boolean is true, and now you can see this string attached to the bait, and this is the visual that you're going to get with this fishing rod. And if you have your own model, you're simply going to have your animation of the casting. So now you can go to the animator, you can see that the casted rod animation is running. So we had the cast rod and then it automatically went to the casted rod. And when we right click, so for example, imagine that you have some kind of bite, we want to start the minigame. So we're starting to pull, we right click on the mouse and it's going to start the pulling animation. And you can also see it over here. The pulling animation is running. So now we are inside the pulling state, and you can also see over here is pulling. And at this moment, we're going to start some kind of mini game. I just want to make sure that everything is working up until now. Again, you're not going to see this string if you're not using this model. But if you have animations, just make sure that at this point they're working and that you're moving from is casted to is pulling, and that of course the is fishing available is detected when you're pointing at a water source by using this fishing area tag. So obviously the fishing rod is not just going to magically appear in our hand when we play the game. We're going to create an inventory item that will be able to be triggered from the inventory. Of course, you can also make it into a craftable item, so maybe you have to craft your fishing rod by gathering some sticks, but at this point in this tutorial, you should already know how to add items into the crafting system. We did this a lot of times. So as we can see, we also have our axe inventory item, so we're simply going to Control D to duplicate it, and we're going to rename it to fishing rod. So we have the fishing rod model and we have the fishing rod inventory item. So we're going to rename it to fishing rod. And it's going to be the same as the axe. It's going to be equipable, but we're not going to consume it, obviously. We're not going to have any kind of other effects on it. So now after you have all of this, you're also going to want to change the sprite because we need a different sprite. I'm going to use this fishing rod sprite, and this is from the same pack that we had a long time ago, and you can probably find it in one of the episodes at the beginning of this series. I'm going to use this sprite for this inventory item, and we're also going to remove this weapon script because the fishing rod is not a weapon, okay? So just make sure that it has the inventory item and it has the drag drop, and simply duplicate your axe inventory item. So in order to be able to instantiate the fishing rod model into our hands, by clicking on the inventory item, we're going to open the equip system, and over here we're going to scroll down to this method, this calculate item model method, and we can see all the different models that we're instantiating, and we're going to add another case. So we're going to copy this, and we're going to have a fishing rod case and fishing rod model. So this is the only thing that you need to do. And of course, if you want to add some kind of sound effect when you're equipping the fishing rod, you should place it over here the same way we did with the axe model. Now, in order to test this out, we're going to take the fishing rod inventory item and we're going to drag it into the inventory. So canvas, and we're going to drag it into one of these slots. And obviously it's not going to be there in the beginning of the game, but you may get this item from a quest, you may buy this item, you may craft this item. It really depends on your game. And of course, we want to remove the fishing rod from our hand. So we're just going to make sure that all the changes are saved. We're going to apply all, and we're going to remove it. And now we're going to run the game. So when we start the game, we don't have the fishing rod in our hand. But if we're opening the inventory, we're going to find the fishing rod over here. Then we're going to right click to place it in the quick slot. And when we press 1, it's going to be instantiated into our hand. Now we can move around, and when we find a water source, we can simply left click and it's going to cast the bait. And at the moment, it's not going to do anything because we still did not add this logic. But after there is some kind of bite, we're going to pull the fish and start the minigame. Now, of course, you can also add it into the crafting system. So it will basically be inside tools. You just add another item. You decide for some items that you need for it, some resources, and then you're going to craft it and it's going to appear in your inventory. But we already know how to do all of this. So just go back to the previous episodes, the ones that we're adding the axe model. If you don't remember, you're going to find how we do this crafting addition for new items. Now, the last thing I want to do is go over this fishing rod script that I created so you will be able to understand how everything is working, especially if you want to change the functionality a bit and maybe in the future you want to do things differently. So we have those 4 booleans that are responsible for letting us know if the item is equipped, if the fishing is available, if we're in a casted position, and if we're in a pulling position. Then we have a reference to the animator, and we have references for all of these parts of our fishing rod. Now, we're using this to actually instantiate the tip of a rope to the bait, and then also the start of the rope, so it will be attached to our fishing rod model. So this is why we need all of these references, and then we're simply connecting them in runtime. Then we also have a reference to the transform of the bait position, so we know where to instantiate the bait. In the start, we're getting a reference to the animator, and we're also setting the is equipped to true. So when we instantiate the fishing rod, this method is going to run, so it will be equipped. So there is no way the fishing rod is not equipped when it's already instantiated, right? Because the start method runs when the script is created. Then inside the update method, we have a simple raycast. So if the item is equipped, we're going to send a raycast to detect the fishing area. So we compare it with the tag. Of course, you can change it to detect the layer or any kind of other condition. But we're detecting the fishing area. And if we are detecting the fishing area, we're going to set the is fishing available to true. Then If we're not already casting or pulling, then we're going to left click on the mouse button. Of course, you can change it, and we're going to start with the casting rod coroutine. Of course, if this is not true, then the fishing is available will be false, and if we're not hitting anything, it will also be false. Now we have inside of the update method this part of code that deals with the rope situation. So if you don't have this model and you don't have the rope, you can just ignore this because it will check if everything is null. It will just skip and it will give you this thing. So it will not crash your game. It will just give you this warning that you don't have all of these references. But if you are using this model, we're simply taking the position of the start of the rope and we're making it the same position as the start of the rod. Then if the bait is in the water, then we're also taking the end of the rope position and we're setting it to the bait position. So this way the rope will be connected both to the rod and to the bait. And I keep saying rope, but it's actually a string, not a rope, but that's not important. Then we have another very important thing inside the update method. So if the rod is casted and we're clicking on the right mouse button, then we're going to pull the rod. Now, of course, this will be available only when we have some kind of bite. So we're going to add a condition over here later. But these are all the things that we find inside the update method. Then we have this cast rod coroutine. So we set the is casted to true, and we're also triggering the cast animation. Then we have a small delay, and we're actually instantiating the bait inside the water. Okay, so we have this bait prefab, we're instantiating it, and we're setting it to the position of the hit. So over here we get the hit from the raycast, right? We hit this part of the water. For example, we hit the middle of the lake, so we're going to get the hit point, and it's going to instantiate the bait in the middle of the lake. If you have a small puddle and you point into this puddle, it's going to instantiate the bait into the puddle. Obviously, don't allow fishing inside the puddle because it's not realistic. Now, I added this comment over here because this is where we're going to add the logic for the biting of the fish. Then we also have the pull rod. So this is when we decide to pull the rod. And over here, we're going to trigger the pull animation. We're going to set the casted to false and the pulling to true. And over here, we're going to have the code for the minigame. So this will be some kind of minigame for actually pulling the fish successfully. So this is the script. And as I told you, this will be in the description of this video. It also comes with the model, but you don't have to buy the model to use this script. And of course, later, this is what we're going to use to continue our fishing system. So the fishing system will all be on this one script. Maybe we're going to have another script, but for now, it will all happen over here. So that's all for this episode, for this part of the fishing system. In the next episode, we're going to start with the actual logic that will make the fish bite our bait. And of course, there will be some kind of RNG, some kind of random calculation for detecting if we got a fish and which kind of fish. Maybe it's a rare fish, maybe it's a common fish. And then when we get this bite, we're going to be able to pull and start some kind of mini game. And then when we are successful, we're going to get the fish into our inventory as an inventory item. And we're going to be able to sell it or maybe eat it or do whatever you want to do with it. So that's all for this episode. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe. Please leave a like. And I'll see you next time.